Ladies and gentlemen, this 2016 Grand Caravan doesn't have enough line pressure in its 62 TE transmission. I'm pretty sure the problem's the pump, but either way we need to take the transmission out of there. This transmission comes in a lot of different cars. Pretty much everything with a 3.6 liter in a transverse configuration. Chrysler 200, Dodge Journey Caravans, Ram ProMaster vans, and the process for removing them is pretty much the same for all of those cars that aren't all-wheel drive. The engine cover's already off. I took it off when I was testing the line pressure yesterday, but the first thing I'm going to do is take out as much transmission fluid as I can. I'm sure there's a way to drain it, but I'm going to suck it out with this fluid extractor. This one was 90 bucks at the parts store, but I think you can get one at Harbor Freight for like 40. Now I'm going to pull the battery out of here. Mine's already loose, but your clamps are a 10 millimeter. This anchor down here is a 13 millimeter. I'll get that out of the way. Next is this battery box. There's 4 wires anchored to it. One right here, one right here, one right here, and one right here. Once those are out of there, there's a 13 millimeter nut here, a 13 millimeter bolt down here, and a 13 millimeter bolt right here. That one you pretty much need a swivel for. Now there's this guy right here. I just unplug it, and there's 2 15 millimeter nuts that are going to be kind of hard to show you right there, and on the metal bracket below it. Take those out and just flop it out of the way. I just set it up on top of the engine like that. Now we want to move this wiring harness and these 2 transmission lines out of the way. I've already got this one on hook because this is where I tested the line pressure. But what we want to do here, see if I can do it with my left hand, is slide this ring back like this, and then we want to get in behind this little metal clip with some skill, probably more grace than I have, and just sort of pry it out of the way. Try not to lose these little guys. You can replace them, but you won't have to if you don't lose them. Okay, to get this wiring harness loose enough to work around, there is an anchor right here on this bell housing stud right here. We need to pry this connector off from this rear transmission harness right here. There's an anchor right here that we need to get out of there as well. Something like that. And then there's actually one, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's right here. That one needs to come loose also, just so we can move the harness around without it being in our way, so we can get to all of the bell housing bolts. The next order of business is this shift cable right here. You just pry straight up on this guy right there. There's this wire stopper, metal stopper in here. Pull that out of there, and then with a tool, squeeze these 2 plastic things together, and it slides straight out the back like that. Sorry, needed 2 hands, but once those are in, just pull this straight back and she's out. Okay, I got a little ahead of you guys there, but you want to take out the bell housing bolts. There's that bottom one there for the top starter bolt, and this bell housing bolt here. There was one right here and one down there that was still there, but all of the bell housing bolts you can reach, just go ahead and pull those out. We want to unhook this wiring harness here too. There's a little black plastic tab just underneath the gray one, and that lets it go, and then just sort of pull on it and pry up. Just don't force anything. And that right there is a little tab that you got to push down to release this gray one. Now you can go ahead and unplug this sensor at any point. Just push down on this little button and pull up on it. And back here, this O2 sensor wire is anchored to this heat shield. You have to unhook that, take this 10 millimeter heat shield bolt out, and these 3 transmission mount bolts right here, those are all in 18 millimeter, and they take a bit of force to take out of there. This next one's going to be hard to show you. The heat shield on top of this transmission mount right here, just over the back side of it, there is a bolt. And it's a 10 millimeter. I'm going to take that off from the top with a wrench. I know it seems kind of strange, but from the top, this is the best time to take that bolt out. Plus, I have this 10 millimeter ratcheting gear wrench, which definitely makes me the dominant primate. Once you have that bolt out of there, you can go ahead and pull that heat shield up from the top. I don't know if it comes out from the bottom or not. I've never tried. But after that, go ahead and look over the top of your transmission and make sure there's nothing hooked up that you don't want hooked up. Everything should be disconnected except for this mount right there. You don't want to mess with that yet. After that, we're going to go underneath. That's in the air. This is where I like to put my jack stands right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the front tires off. Over here on the driver's side, if you look up through the wheel well here, you'll see these 2 plug-ins here. These are speed sensors. You just want to unplug these guys. It's actually easier if you reach up through where I got the flashlight pointed, but I wanted to show you guys how cool that was, so I guess I'll hurt my wrist by jamming it in there. Alright, those are unplugged. Now let's move on to CV shafts. Yay! Now what I'm going to do is take out these two 21mm caliper bracket bolts, and then we're going to hang the caliper with a zip tie by the coil spring up here. I already pulled these out of their little holders right here, just so we can stretch the wire out as far as possible, and we're going to take off the CV nut, which on this van is a 32mm. Okay, that's all done. The CV nut's off, the caliper's hanging by a zip tie. You know, my real name is Ty, and my CV handle is actually Zip Tie. Has been since 1996. True story. Now we're going to move on to this right here, though. We're going to take out this bolt and this bolt. It's got a nut on the other side. We're just going to pop those out and flop this whole spindle housing outward so we can pull the CV axle out from behind it. That's what that looks like. You just flop the spindle housing outward and the CV axle comes out the back side. Now we got to get the CV axle out of the transmission, which this can be kind of a fight. I stick a pry bar behind it and wiggle it. Everybody's got their own way. Sometimes they come out easy, sometimes you fight with them for hours. Let's see how this goes. That actually came out of there without incident. Now we're going to move on to the passenger side of the vehicle. Over here on the passenger side, it's the same sort of business. Pull this wire out of its holder so you can stretch the wire out. Remove these two 21mm caliper bracket bolts and hang the caliper from the coil with a zip tie. Take out this one 32mm CV nut and remove these two 21mm bolts with nuts on the back side so you can flop the spindle housing outward and pull the CV axle out from the back side. But we have to come over here and remove this plastic cover as well, which you have to pull these molding clips out. I call those Christmas trees. There's one right there and there's one right there. Then up at the top there's two 10mm bolts. Once all that stuff's out of there, this whole piece of plastic moves out of the way so you can see the engine. We'll have to have access to the engine so we can turn it and remove our torque converter bolts. Now here in the Rust Belt, the passenger side CV axle is always stuck on the intermediate shaft. Since they both have to come out and I don't want to fight with it, I'm just going to take them out together. There's three bolts that hold that intermediate shaft in. One there, and the other one's really hard to see. I don't even know if I can get you up in there. It's right at the very top of that thing. There. It's a 16mm. If you can get your passenger side CV axle off, you're going to have a much easier time than me. You can take it out this way. It's not easy. The top bolt's the hardest one to get to. That's the one I suggest you take out first so you don't have the weight of the CV axle on it and you can spin it out with your fingers. And take care of your splines. Now let's move on to the rest of the van. First, this cross member has to come down. That front bolt is an 18mm. Those two are 16mm. Those three right there are 16mm, and the back one is also a 16mm. Next thing is removing this front transmission mount. There's that bolt right there, this bolt right here, and one right there. Those are a 16mm, which is the same as a 5/8, so you can use your plug wrench, which is what I'm about to do. With that out of the way, there's two 15mm starter bolts. Remove those and just slide the starter back and out of the way. Slide it back something like that. Now we're going to move to the back of the engine, and there's one bolt left on that transmission mount right there. It's an 18mm. We'll take that out and the engine will swing. It's time to remove this plastic cover for access to the torque converter bolts. Pry out on it with a tool while you push in on these two little tabs, and it'll come right out. Use a 27mm socket to turn the crankshaft. Turn the crankshaft counterclockwise to get the torque converter bolts into position for removal. Once the torque converter bolts are out, go ahead and remove your last 6 bell housing bolts. One there, one here, here, and here. Once those bell housing bolts are out, you can just take a pry bar and pry the transmission away from the engine. At this point, the only thing holding the transmission up is the transmission mount itself. So we'll put a jack under this and then we'll remove that mount. Alright, jack's under the transmission. I'm going to remove this bolt and lower the jack. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The transmission is out. If you're wondering about this jack, it comes from Harbor Freight. It costs around $100 and it can be operated with a ratchet or an impact. My next video will be me pulling this pump out, inspecting it, and most likely replacing it.